Yeah! Have you ever been captivated by rock and roll before? Has it ever taken over your mind? Ever taken over your body? Well, rock and roll has played a major role in my life. From a little child, my best friend's father played in a local rock band. And I can remember from a very early age being let into these bars because we were with the band. And we'd stand there in awe every night as they just rocked the stage. That musical influence has lasted a lifetime for me. I'm here today to talk about the roots of rock and roll and explain the impact that it had on our culture and our social our American society, First, we must understand the musical influences that created the genre. Until the mid-1900s, music was pretty segregated, just like America. Jazz, blues music, gospel music was actually famous among the black community. Country, folk, western music was popular among the white community. And the youth of the 40s and the 50s, they actually became increasingly interested in these different genres of music because of the easy access to them. Cleveland disc jockey Alan Freed became famous for playing a number of these genres on his radio show. He has actually been credited with coining the phrase rock and roll because that's what he would actually refer to his mix as. This freedom of expression opened the door for a wave of young talent. Artists like Chuck Berry, Buddy Holly, Little Richard, and Elvis Presley took over the airwaves. Adults of these decades actually believed the new mix to be a fad and that it wouldn't last, but they were certainly wrong. In 1955, we seen the very first rock and roll song to top the Billboard charts, Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock. Yeah. Now that we understand the musical influences of rock and roll, we must understand the social and cultural impact as well. Segregation played a major role in American history. In 1954, the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional for black and white kids to be separated in school. And that is the point when America's integration finally began. This country began to see children lose the racial mentality of their predecessors, and rock and roll is a prime example of that. White children began to enjoy the upbeat sound of rhythm and blues music that the black community was playing. This rise in popularity was first seen as rebellion, and many adults were outraged, but there was nothing that they could do. Concert halls were constantly being filled up with mixed audiences. Eric Valancourt said, "Rock and roll challenged the status quo in the United States by creating a music and a culture that blended races, something that America had been afraid of and opposed since the end of slavery and the Civil War." Rock and roll might not have been the driving force behind the Civil Rights Movement, but it certainly aided the cause. Continuing on through the 60s and 70s, musicians used their art as a way of promoting peace and liberty among the nation. Cheryl Barrett first said, "The revolution in music that we know of as rock and roll evolved alongside and as much a part of the Civil Rights Movement. While not all phases of its evolution is directly traceable to the movement, the social anxiety and the social revolution of the movement is intimately woven into the heart of rock and roll music." Now that we understand rock and roll's important past, you might wonder if its values and its sense of self-expression still hold true in this modern world in 2015. In 60 years, rock and roll has gone from a rebellious act to an expression of freedom to being commercialized and taken advantage of. Music producers have sought every possible way to make money off the artist, and in the process they have forgotten what it is all about. Abby Newton said, "Music is a way for people to express themselves and to share ideas, whether through poetic lyrics or throbbing anthems. But today's artists are not known for their music, but for how their extravagant their outfits are and how many times their wealthy relatives can get them out of jail. In the midst of it, the music is actually lost." Major labels control and censor the music being released by the artist, which limits the ability to express their individuality. These major labels use their money to fill the music on the radios and on the televisions. Commercialized music just loses the very essence of freedom that rock and roll is founded on. Fortunately, smaller independent labels exist for the musicians who still want to share their art despite having the publicity of the major labels. To certain artists, individuality is a lot more important than fame. Now that we understand the roots of rock and roll and its impact on American culture, we can admire it for what it really is. Music can be one of our greatest gifts of expression, and rock and roll really opened the door for it. In the words of the great Chuck Berry, "Hail, hail, rock and roll, deliver me from the days of old. Long live rock and roll, the beat of the drums loud and bold. Rock, rock, rock and roll, the feeling there in your body and in your soul." Thank you very much.